Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, let's look at another machine here that I have picked up in recent months. And this is a potentizer, a homeopathic preparation manufacturer that is very similar to the one I just showed you made in Mexico. And you can check that out in the other videos here available. This is one of the older ones that's, which I think is a little nicer. It's also made in a case that you can close. That other one does not come in a closable case. It's open. It's heavier. It's bigger. This is kind of nice. You can close it up and actually, stick it to the side. You don't have to leave it out, and it's not as heavy and big. So this you can, close up, and you can stick this kind of like a briefcase somewhere else. So it's, as usual, these older models produced by Bruce Copen. And this is a Bruce Copen unit. I'm not sure. This is an analog unit. I'm not sure if this was one of the ones that he made before his death or not. As I've mentioned, which I'm not going to repeat here, the Bruce Copen story is an interesting one that continues to go on. And as usual with most things, that once the individual involved dies, organizations tend to fall apart. I'm not sure whether he had family, meaning a wife or etc. But what is so classic with these things is that very few people pick up after their husbands. They enjoy the paychecks, but they don't participate at all. So female. This happened with Christopher Hills. I actually even contacted his wife and wanted to reprint his stuff. And of course, her being having a problem with everything, never followed through. So his work has never been reprinted, and now people own it, steal it, and do whatever they want with it. And I guess they're happy with that, living in their corruption. I'm sure she was contacted by the same scumbuck Satanists that run the industry and can't wait to bend over literally for them. So that's typical. Copen's family, whatever that may be, if there was one. I thought that he may have at one time been gay, and this is a problem because they don't pass things on. I don't know. So I heard somewhere else that maybe he was married. We're trying to look into all this and write a book on the pioneers of radionics, and he was the one that kind of followed the entire situation once Delaware took over and all the things that happened with that. Now, I've never seen any organization where the particularly female relatives have taken over and try and run the business. Like most people that have wives, and particularly females, they don't listen to their videos. They don't listen to their audio talks. They just take the money. So it's the same old story with this kind of things and why a lot of these things die. Why they're not personally involved in the process, I don't know. It's all a problem. So it's a usual problem you run into. Occasionally, you have some male children that take over, usually highly incompetent and didn't pay attention, and usually are gym teachers, between smelling underwear from their students, they do something. But generally, they are not connected. They didn't work within the business at the time, or did it kind of part-time and went their own way into another industry, which is so typical. So you run into all those problems, and of course that's the same thing with Copen. Copen apparently gave rights to or had salespeople, which of course when you're building a business you should. I know he did have reps in the United States who sold his equipment very poorly, didn't do much. The equipment wasn't easy to obtain. He also did some contract with the devil, having a distributorship in Germany who just stole all his stuff and did whatever to it. And of course, the British, being the bendovers that they are, gave them some sort of bizarre respect until they found out what really went on as they're stealing and criticizing everything the new company is doing. But that's so British. So the whole idea is that when we get involved in all of these things, we run into the same problem. So the Copen story is an interesting one. He's written probably 25 or 30 books. All of these are only available in used editions, usually because they're relatively rare for a lot of money. That doesn't help anybody. When you pay a bookstore or an individual for a rare book, nothing goes to the publisher. Nothing goes to the writer. So this is not profit for anybody. And the rights to these books, are, of course, are in dispute. Well, who owns the rights to this? Apparently, the modern Copen Labs seems to have no interest in publishing any of his material. They've also moved away since his death into using electronic crap that has no validity whatsoever. I don't know if Copen was moving into this or not. Copen's machines look attractive. They're built fairly well, but there's a credibility problem of the fact that there really is nothing happening inside, that his machines had electricity that were going to very minor aspects of the machine, and none of the tuning had anything to do with electronic in most of his units. So he was kind of pulling a con there, although he built good instruments. But he certainly didn't sell these instruments inexpensively. His instruments have always been several $1,000s, and I don't know if they're worth that or not. They're basically just a whole bunch of dials. It's difficult to tune in things. It's intimidating looking at dials, and we're going to show you that right now. Let's open this up. Now, this is a machine that you make homeopathic preparations. The top comes off, so you can easily handle it. It's kind of like a briefcase model. As I said, this is not too heavy. It's able to be handled fairly easily. It has a nice carry handle, so when you put the case on there, it's like pretty much a briefcase. So that's a nice feature because, this stuff, everybody's got basically room problems. Let's see if this will help if we put it like this to see it. Okay, so that balance is pretty good so we can see it a little better. The problem with his units, as you can see, all of these knobs become quite a mental block, and it becomes difficult to use these, even though there are rate books where you tune the numbers in. So you're not really getting your own rates, even though you do have a rubbing plate over here to obtain your own rates if you desire to. These are kind of interesting dials because they have this actual colored semi-translucent black where you see the numbers through it as you turn it. So now it's kind of a nice variance of a dial. I haven't seen those anywhere else before. I don't know if they're important or not. A dial's a dial, but that's a nice little different feature. So you've also got, of course, there's 5, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 dials on this side. And you've got 12 dials on this side. So, that's a lot of dials to try and figure out how to use it. Are those necessary? Well, they're really not. And again, as a potentizer, you have your 2 plates. And again, if this is electromagnetic, he's got non-conductive wells. You call these wells, basically, because they go down in there. So they're plastic wells, and there is no metal sticking through in any way whatsoever. So you're basically transferring energy into a non-conductive if you think you're doing an electromagnetic process, which a lot of these machines insinuate they're doing. You've got your typical, and if you want to see the guts of this, like everything else, you have to be a Patreon All Access member, and you should be doing that. Now that it came up, I hope you're subscribed to this channel, and I hope that you are going over to our Patreon and to All Access to then be able to get a whole bunch of more information, and rare information you're not going to find anywhere else. Everything that I put out there is pretty much exclusive to me. Nobody shows you machines. Nobody opens them up because all they're doing is selling their own crap. And crap is the key word there. So I'm the only one that does that. So if you're really a radionic connoisseur, you want to see what's inside of these. And I've looked at many, many machines going back 100 years, and there's nothing inside of them. The bottom line is that these are not frequency machines and never have been. That's not what they were to begin with, and that's not what they developed into. Yet we have a lot of very badly trained, ignorant, buffoonish practitioners who are trying to combine frequencies, Hertzian measurable frequencies that you can measure with a meter, trying to combine that with unmeasurable, subtle informational fields to call them the same. And it's not. Radionics is a very particular field of subtle energy physics that is unique unto itself. And it has nothing to do with Hertzian frequencies that you can pick up on a meter. Now, I keep repeating this because you need to know that. And of course, people don't know that because I'm the only world-renowned expert on radionics and subtle energy physics out there. And of course, everyone's jealous, and the ignorant people that run crappy organizations refuse to listen to those of knowledge. So they're just, the complete lowest level of boobs out there. And then you have the people that make and manufacture instruments who want to say their stuff is the best when it's just a box of crap that we don't even really know what the cost of the box of craps are because you have to call them up for a quote. And really, and I've taken those units apart, the SE5, and you'll see what kind of garbage they are. So, I mean, this is really a reality that is out there that we need to look at. But, I was always open to looking, what have people done? I mean, this is how you cut through a lot of research. If you have the skilled training and 54 years of background in it, you can look at somebody's particular tools and say, well, this is good, this is bad, this makes no sense. And then you can come up with a synergistic reality of making something much better. And of course, when you start taking everything apart here and you start looking at the circuits of this tells to give you a really good idea of what's going on. But as I've always said with Bruce Copen, his units have always been made fairly well, even though for an instrument that tends to be expensive, he's not using printed, he's using labels here. Now, I do the same thing to cut costs, but this is a guy who has been making instruments. They couldn't get this screen printed, so we could have this instead of having a printed label. So there is, realities to production and everything else. But if you're going to make a really fine instrument, charge a lot of money for it, and put all this time into it, I believe he made his own cases and everything else. Well, take a little time and do that a little better. You could even have, which I do now, I have plates made that have different names on it. And these are metal plates professionally engraved and put them on. Now, I should have done something like here other than using basically label stickers. So that's the one criticism I could say of his construction for someone who's building something from the scratch up that has employees, that has a big factory, I don't know, big factory, but has a factory and has been doing this for 20 years before his death. So all of that, of course, we're getting into, again, what is conductive and non-conductive. Here again, this is all plexiglass. It's cheap, but it's a non-conductor. It's plastic. So what are you using, Bruce? Are we using Hertzian fields or are we using fantasy energies? Or, of course, you don't understand what the type of energy that goes into radionics. And, of course, I'm the only one that really does. Everybody else is building nonsensical garbage. There's not a single credible person in the entire industry, if there is such a thing, as radionics. They're all boobs and idiots, and they build crap. So, and they've been doing it for 40 years, like those people who worked with Hieronymus, the Kelly group. Now his son is taking over because he died young, by the way, and his wife died of cancer, breast cancer. Those are all the wonderful things that the amazing Hieronymus machine did. So the whole idea is we have all these things with absolutely no verification of it. They have no idea what they're doing. They're mimicking Hieronymus, and I guess his machine is going on at least 80 to 100. Well, I guess it's been about 80 years since he came out with his first machine, and he's been dead for many, many years. So the whole idea is still the same old mimicky stuff, and they have no new information, no new designs, no new nothing, because they're empty people that just copy. So we go in there, and this is a typical potentizer type film, type machine. And it has all the usual stuff. You have a memory, you have a single memory, and this is to copy what you put in there. And of course, we have the card slot up here, which is Copen's famous for using an electromagnetic card there. So they are basically magnetic strips like what's on your credit card, which you're supposed to put in magnetic numbers, I guess. And then you insert that into the machine, and the machine picks it up without anything of value in there whatsoever. So again, credit card machines go through a particular process that read the magnetic strip there. There are no readers in here. There's just a couple of plates. Again, it's bogus. But they're trying to make things very simple and easy for it. I'm assuming if we were to talk to Bruce Copen today, he would tell you this is a psychic process, and all it is that we're giving you a card as a psychic crutch, and you psychically put the energy into it, and then it comes out the other end, smooth and fancy and molded into a perfect machine. So the whole idea, I'm sure that's what his concept was, but it doesn't make sense. When you start using non-conductive wells, both plastic, just as the other machine in Mexico, when you use a plastic rubbing plate and you're saying you're using electromagnetic nature, it doesn't make sense. Your electrical wires are all coated with plastic because they're what? Insulators. Plain and simple. It's an insulator that stops the voltage and current from going into you and to follow down the line. Secondly, it allows you to lay it on things. You can touch it, etc. If you grabbed your electrical wire that was not coated, you would get voltage or a shock from it. Duh. So the whole idea is that we have these kind of problems. So let's flick the main switch here. And I'm not going to go into how it works and everything else or what it looks like inside. Those are for Patreon supportive members only. This unit cost me over $600. And the point is, nothing is cheap. These things retail now for several thousand. I think they have similar units, or even this exact unit may be for sale. But I don't promote other people. They don't promote me. They have no interest in what I do, and I don't have much interest in them. I'm a serious researcher. So I invest lots of money in getting older instruments to find out, well, what's going on, dude? Surf's up. I hear Malibu calling, man. So the whole idea is that we have that reality that we have to work with. And as such, we invest in those to see what's going on. They don't. They have no interest in anything that really works, because the bottom line is that radionic tech is so advanced that it makes their stuff look like the shit it is. The low quality, poorly engineered crap that's out there. And I'm sure these people buy Volkswagens and think they're genius cars. So this is the kind of crap you run into with all these people. Now, I'm sure Copen was very well versed. He was a big occult scientist. He wrote a bunch of stuff on metaphysics and hypnotism and covered the great field. I mean, this guy was a well-educated man who wrote a lot of stuff other than just on, quote, radionics. But his technology, he was lost. Like they're all lost. They don't get it. I have broken the code. I know exactly how all of it works. And watch for these coming amazing things that radionic tech will be putting out in the next coming months. But certainly, at least he did a quality job. He tried to get into different things and did make quality equipment. But you certainly paid for it. You know, 20 years ago, his equipment was selling for $3,000-$4,000 minimum, some $5,000 and $6,000. So never was it cheap. So I guess the actual gossip, or what can we call it, the mythology behind Copen, where he picked you up at the airport in a Rolls Royce, may have been true. Certainly to make these items doesn't cost much. The parts aren't expensive. The guts aren't expensive. And if you're selling them for thousands of dollars, he had a fairly good profit. So, and I'm shocked, apparently, of how many instruments out there, because you can't find these that easily. If there's so many of these instruments that have been sold, and they are instruments, you have to learn how to play them. They're not machines which you turn on. Another very important differentiation you need to understand in the lingo of this industry. Everything is an instrument, like a guitar. Guitars work, don't they? Or do they? I do. You just play them. Yeah, a person who's learned how to play a guitar can make nice music. If you pick it up and just strum it, it sounds like garbage. So that's the same thing here. You have to learn how to play these machines. They're instruments. They are not, I use that term again because those are interchangeable. A machine generally is like a car, but even a car, you have to learn how to use it. So the whole idea is machines generally do something for you easily with a minor amount of training. They're not instruments. This is an instrument. You have to learn how to use it to get any kind of decent results from it. So let's flip the main switch here, and you'll see how these lights come on nice and bright and so forth. It was made by the original Copen company, a lot different than the crap that we just showed you from Mexico. So it's very, very interesting. You can see nice bright lights. It has all the formulas, single, copy, etc. So you have all these things here. And of course, you have to use this in a particular way. You can punch, you can dial in here and then hit memory and it saves it. Single memory, I think there's multi-memories. There's a few other things here that I'm not overly familiar with. I would have to read the instructions. There is, of course, there's a timer, which you start by this. I guess that turns it off. Here that says cancel. And there are many other knobs that do different things. Here's the decode button, whatever that means. Code, which changes it. So there's all sorts of little features here, which I'm not entirely sure how this works into the process. But if they are working by the electromagnetic, we are getting into yet a problem again, because homeopathic preparations are not Hertzian in nature. They're energetic and vibrational in nature. And you can also see here, I don't know if you can see that from your perspective, but you can see that there's an actual light here going into, this would be the well that is the copy well, where the final item. This generally is considered what I call the out plate. This over here is the in well. This is the out well where you get a finished product. And of course you can send that to, this is a 2-card slot. So you could put 2 different cards in there with formulas on it. So there's all sorts of little things here, but you can also see how this is not something that you're going to take 10 minutes to figure out how to work. This is really an instrument that you're going to have to practice and learn how to use. Now, you do get rate books that tell you where to place the dials on and everything else. The dials are not numbered, which I do not like. That shows another big error. We assume, as is done in all Western cultures, it's not like that everywhere. A lot of cultures, particularly Eastern cultures, Middle Eastern, etc., start from the right and go left. Matter of fact, that's how Jewish and Arabic documents, you go from the right and go left. Western is where you go from, based in, of course, the Romans, who created everything for the West, teaching the savage Europeans some civilization, all go from the left to the right. So we're assuming this is number 1. It is not marked. Another error. They did enough of these, but it would look, it's always a problem marking your dials unless it's really clear. I have some dial units I'm working on, and since they're going to be all in one row, it makes it very easy to use. But we don't know. So what happens is this, so we've got 5 here. Is this 6 or is this 6? Does it go down and across, or is it your typical left to right? Here is number 6. This would be number 11. And then we go to here. So we don't know unless we read the instructions of how to do it. That's the same thing here. We're assuming this is 1, 2, 3. Is this 4? Or is this 4? We don't know. So these are all the things that run into problems when you don't number your dials. But of course, instructions that came with these units were pretty good, so it's not that big of a deal. But you can see how they're nice and bright the way they should, unlike the Mexican one, which isn't made too well. You can turn off these different switches. They have nice toggle switches, and these are strong and nice. They're well made. Well, again, we have the usual problem of a stick plate that is made out of plastic, as I've just covered. Everything else there, again, we're dealing with some sort of pseudo-electronics here. I don't know if underneath these dials, and as you can see, the nice type of dials, as I said, I kind of like these, but any dial will do. We don't know. I'm not sure. I'm assuming there's potentiometers underneath there. Now, potentiometers regulate the flow of energy, to put it kind of simply. Hieronymus used old-style tunable capacitors to dial in his frequencies, which are different than potentiometers, even though tunable capacitors were replaced by the easier-to-make and, to a large extent, more efficient potentiometers. Basically, as much as some people like to go back to Hieronymus and use tunable capacitors, Hieronymus used those because that was what was available then. Anybody making equipment now does not use tunable capacitors because they are difficult to near impossible to find. Oftentimes you can find surplus of tunable capacitors, and you will spend $35 to $75 per tunable capacitor. So if you had to use a capacitor into each one of these at $75, you could see the enormous cost that this would be, even more than the high price that these are in general. So that's a little bit of occult engineering for the people out there. So, but of course you wouldn't know that, and neither would anybody else, neither does most manufacturers, because they're too stupid to even know the guts and the parts that are out there that people have to deal with. So, it really bothers me when I see Suto, and I'm assuming there's frequencies going through here, and that he's talking about this stuff in an electromagnetic manner. Yet we have insulators here, here, here. These are insulators. Now, this is an insulator too because it's plastic, but I think from the other ones I've seen here, inside here are two metal plates, which you insert the card in that give you that certain contact. But how are you going to change energy from here over to here if it's insulated? Now, wherever the energy is coming from, unless they're sending the energy through that actual, let's see if we can get that to light up there. Unless we're going to be going through that particular light, I guess, yeah, that's the copy, which means the energy is flowing through there. Now, I doubt if it's coming through the light. But where is the energy coming from? There's no connections in here at all. There's no metal. It's a solid plastic plate. And so is this one. There's no way that energy from here can go into here and then over to here. It doesn't work like that. And there is no electrical connection, whatever. So what we're doing is saying, oh, well, that's the vibration. What is it? Vibrational or is it Hertzian? Well, let's get it correct. But these are the kind of things that the average person don't think about because they're not an occult engineer like I am, nor have they studied these units. But this doesn't take a high IQ. If you're a person with electronic knowledge and you see something like this, you laugh at it. There's no movement of energy. So what are we talking about again? So why build something that's electronic using Hertzian energies if it really doesn't work that way? It's a lot of work and time and trouble. And what I found out is that when you make units like that, you have decreased the effectiveness of it, not increased it. So that's why we've moved away from all of this nonsense of moving Hertzian energy when we're not using Hertzian energy, using Hertzian technology. It's like using a water hose and then connecting it to your electrical outlet in your house. Don't make any sense. You're not moving electricity through a water hose and vice versa. But that's what all these people do. So it would be interesting to be able to talk to Bruce Copen and find out what was in his head that he was making these things like that. This kind of stuff tends to be very much based in the marketing. This is what people want to see. Give me little ladies, Dr. Tua. I like the little ladies. Look, it's working. Watch. Not working? Working. Ooh, that makes me hard. So the whole idea is that these are the kind of things that you actually run into that is done strictly as a sales thing so that people look at it and say, well, it's got lights on it. It's working. It's got switches on it that light up. Ooh, ooh, oh, man, what a turn on. So the whole idea is this is what the average boob out there looks at. People think that putting a sharp calculator on top of a unit that serves no purpose whatsoever. Where rubbing plates don't connect to anything like on the SE5. It connects to the outside of a plastic cabinet, a plastic non-conductive cabinet. So here we go. They're mixing water and oil. It's apples and oranges. It goes on and on that it makes no sense. And of course, this is the reason why this entire field has no credibility to anybody that looks at it. Electrical engineers laugh at this. Regular scientists and so forth just laugh at it as well. It just doesn't make any sense. And there's no reason for things to be like that. But there is, if you're going to think in that kind of a bizarre and bad attitude that this is some sort of electrical process, some sort of measurable process, and then you're getting yourself in trouble. So there isn't much else to that. You have this particular cabinet. This is just kind of plastic that is wrapped over cheap wood. This is a way things are made for years. You've got the little handle here to carry it, which is nice, as I've already mentioned. You can, it's like a briefcase. You can stick it next to some space in your house. The bottom is the same, even though it has these kind of, are those actually, yeah, those are kind of screws, which certainly is not going to protect your countertop. They're metal. Of course, it runs on standard electricity. You have this kind of a plug-in, which is relatively rare, probably kind of used in Britain most. You don't see that in too many appliances anymore. It is variable current. And it says on here, check the correct voltage range. Select before power up. Now, this is a problem, and of course, we've had to define this with a lot of our products now. They go around the world, and people just plug them in. This is a pretty stupid mistake, particularly since they're not using your same plug. That ought to be a giant red flag. The giant red flag is that you got a USA plug, and it means that it uses USA current. So you have to watch that. So anyone who buys electronics from us, make sure you read the frequently asked page and the terms and condition page so you understand what you're getting and save everybody misery. A lot of our products now are sent from the manufacturers, and they send to the people, whatever country they're in, they generally provide you with at least the correct voltage. You know, it's amazing how many actual plugs there are out there. It's different in Singapore. It's different in Hong Kong. It's different in Australia and the UK. These are different from Continental or the EU. They use different plugs. So it's something to keep in mind. And of course, most electric today, most products will work on 110 or 240. And of course, this is UK. You can see how, which is a nice little feature. They built in using this anywhere in the world. Here's the 120 that is common to the United States, and the 240 that is used in most of the world, and particularly in Europe. So that's a nice little feature. It's built into it. You don't have to go out and buy something else, which can be just, if nothing else, a pain. You can get these in most places, what are called transformers, and they would be a step-down transformer. If you're in Europe, you have to step down from 240 to go to 120. And these are readily available everywhere, particularly in Europe, so it's not a big thing. And it's difficult for me in the manufacturing to send you plugs and transformers. I used to do that, and that drives cost up, weight and everything else. These things can be heavy and take up space, so it costs a lot. That's up to the actual buyer to figure that out, and it should be very clear. The voltage is on every unit that is sold of what it is. You have to make sure you check it. And of course, even if you're getting it something like this, as it says, check the voltage. So if you have it on 220 and you plug this into the United States, you're going to short your unit out. So you got to make sure it's turned on to this, just for general knowledge. He had it built in like this. Most manufacturers now make them so it can take both voltages, and they built it right in so you don't have to use transformers. Some don't. I've had that problem, particularly with our 7.8 tube amplifiers, where they're made specifically for your region. So, but you have to watch that, and that is your responsibility. Now, as I said, here's that unique plug-in in that way. A lot of the Copen stuff can be plugged into other machines, and they use these kind of unique plugs. You don't see this much more you don't see that much in the U.S. at all. You don't see these much being in use anymore. This is kind of an old technology, but some machines have it, and I've seen this in a lot of UK units, particularly those from not only Copen, but with the Mapleton Trust and other people who made units. These are very common plugs to use in general. I'm not sure what this is for. That looks like almost a grounding, and grounding is another issue to talk about with radionics, which I used to ground our units, and it may be something to talk about in other videos. Vitamins. So everybody, that should be a clear understanding of what's going on. This is a great look at it. Now, again, if you want to see the guts of this, you're going to have to be a Patreon All Access member. And you should be liking this video. You should be subscribing. This you're going to find nowhere else. You're never going to see the guts, and you generally don't even see the machine because these are basically vintage machines. The newer ones, nobody's showing those on anywhere that I've seen anywhere other than if they're for sale someplace. So this is a fantastic. So if you're into this kind of technology, you're not going to see anything like this anywhere else. So you certainly should be supporting this organization so we can obtain more rare machines. We're always on the look for classic machines. We just picked up a Dimshaw Spectrochrome unit, and we're going to be showing that as well. And we have all sorts of other ones. Some we've shown, some we haven't. And of course, those who are supporters of this organization will be able to see the guts. But these things are not free. They are expensive, even in their used format, if you can find them, period. And I found some very, very rare ones. But the bottom line is that they all cost a lot of money, and they are very rare. And if you want to see what's in them and you want to see how they work, which should fascinate anybody who's really into this, you need to support this organization. Research is expensive. It costs thousands and thousands of dollars a month to have basic research done, to obtain books, information, buy tools like this, and of course buy parts and stuff to see exactly, to test out new ways of doing things. All of this requires time and energy. And we've been able to do it in amazingly high ways, very simply, and at really fair prices. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Stay tuned. As I said, make sure you subscribe and like. And tune back soon. We have many more fascinating vintage classic units to show.